Hello, and welcome to the Argyle HR Leadership Forum Talent Innovation 2024. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our speaker, Tim Young, Senior Vice President, Human Resources Operations, Pearson. We're super excited to have Tim with us for a keynote presentation titled, The Business Case for AI in HR. Welcome, Tim. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Nick, and Argyle team. Thank you for having me today. I'm so pleased to be here and actually speak about a topic that I'm very passionate about. Will hopefully add some value to you and to whatever you're involved with in your company or organization. So as the title suggests, we're really going to focus in on not just AI, though obviously that's the buzz. That's what a lot of people are passionate about, worried about, thinking about right now. But really, let's get practical today on how you can approach in your organization the best way to start to implement AI in a way that's going to support the growth of your organization, your employees, your customers, et cetera. But let's start off with a little bit around our learning objectives for the day. So let me go back here. What you'll walk away with, I hope, after the next 25 minutes or so with me is really the fundamentals of intelligent automation and how all of that plays together with the world of artificial intelligence. I'm going to make an assumption that not everyone here has been a student of AI for a long time. So we're going to try and level set on what it means and what we're talking about. Also about how you, maybe new to the field or trying to understand, can really spot the best credible players out there, the organizations, the companies, the technologies that will help you. We'll also talk a lot about the opportunities and how you can create a ROI with using AI, right? An area that's going to be very important to the people who fund your work and who are supporting it as it's evolving. And finally, we'll just get really practical about the pitch you're going to make and what sorts of things you need to include in that pitch and what sorts of use cases you could bring to bear. So with that in mind, let me just do a really fast commercial about Pearson. Many of you may have bought our textbooks or may be aware of our assessment centers or other things, but I'm not going to spend any time on this other than just to say we are the world's leading learning company. And you should go check us out. I'm not here to sell anything to you today. I'm purely here as a peer, but I wanted to talk about the company I'm in just for a moment here, just to let you know who we are and give you some context around the organization that I'm supporting and what my business case and my use cases for AR are put into place for. So check us out. You can learn more about our business online or through the slides afterwards. Let's start on the same page here. I want to just give you just a fast history of what I'm going to interchangeably refer to as intelligent automation, as well as hyperautomation. And I want to start back 30 or so years when we get into the 1990s and we start to talk about desktop automation. We often think of these in terms of things like macros. And for the first 2 to 3 decades of automation, this is really the way we incrementally got better at maybe Excel spreadsheets or automating different workflows in our technologies such as Microsoft technologies and others, right? And this worked for quite some time, but really it's over the last 10 years when we've started to see a ramp up of new technologies and new concepts being introduced, starting with we'll call process automation and a buzzword that's been around for a while, RPA, or robotics process automation. This has really kicked off a sequence of how we can think about automating our work with intelligence, really getting into what is it that we do today, how can we make it faster, more succinct, perhaps even done better than a human can, and how that has evolved now into things such as cognitive automation, where virtual assistants come into play and interact with us, And then in the last few years, we've really started to see more and more along this line of hyper automation, where we're combining different technologies. A lot of them low code, not taking a lot of development, but being able to interact with people as well as run processes on the back end and understand the language we're using, whether that's a different language or whether it is truly just the way we speak and what our intents are. And this has evolved, of course, into what we oftentimes shorthand for all of the above, which is Gen AI, and really the ability to take massive amounts of information and be able to summarize that and generate content or interactions for us. When I speak of Gen AI, I want you to think about it as only part of the overall answer, right? I've defined here a little bit of how I think of hyperautomation, bringing together concepts such as AI, but also machine learning, large language models that really bring together all the content, the information, the natural language processing and understanding that understands what we are inputting and responds in a way that we can understand, and the RPA on the back end, and really various types of AI here with conversational AI that's interacting with us over chat or voice, cognitive AI that's really understanding what we mean when we speak or when we type, and then the generative AI boom that we're all very aware of now, that's really ingesting all sorts of information and being able to replay it to us in concise ways, along with RP on the back end. So hopefully that gives us a little foundation, because as I move now into the business cases and what we're trying to drive in our organizations, which will be different for all of us, we really need to start drawing on these different sorts of technology and being able to speak of them somewhat uniquely, so that we know what we're going after. Let's talk about the pitch. So as you go into whatever, I don't know, deciding body, maybe it's executives in your organization, maybe you are the executive, or maybe there's a board or a committee that's making decisions, or maybe you're just trying to create a groundswell of interest in what you're trying to drive. It's really important at this point to think about, why would anyone buy what you're trying to sell or what you're trying to do? And so when we think about the business case, we can't just go to the dollars and cents of it all, right? We really need to think about what value are we bringing, and how will people connect with that value in a way that they're willing to invest in what we're going after. So this is really kind of rule number one going into creating that business case, is developing a very powerful pitch. Think of it as your home run. What are you going to go after that is so important, that it will drive such value that everyone is going to want to invest in it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my pitch. And this is one use case for AI. This is one way you can approach it. I think it probably applies to most organizations in some form or fashion, but certainly the way I want to sell it to you today is a way that you can look at it for as a sample, or a way that you can also maybe tweak it so it meets your exact needs. Or if you want to do something completely different, that's fine as well. But let's talk about mine. Mine is the intelligent digital assistant. All of us have interacted with chatbots, and I just showed in a previous slide, they've been around a while. A lot of them were created for specific purposes and could only answer certain questions. So when we start talking about a digital assistant or an intelligent digital assistant, we really mean a massive evolution, such as what ChatGPT showed us is possible in terms of how we can interact. Now, I'm in HR, I think most of you are, but you're in the ecosystem, likely of a large or medium-sized organization, and people have questions. They need answers to their questions, and sometimes they need to transact in systems. So when I think of an intelligent digital assistant, it needs to be as good as and even better than a human in interacting with you. And not only that, it can and should be available all day, every day. It should be easy to find. It shouldn't be hidden. It's in the flow of work. So for me, I've got a little logo here for Microsoft Teams, which in my organization is how we communicate with each other. It should be one gateway for help. So while I represent the HR piece of this, I also bring along my IT tech support, my finance, and other facilities, other stakeholders into the equation, so that this is one gateway for help, regardless of the type of help you need. And this really needs to be the single source of truth. There shouldn't also be a lot of other ways you can get answers in order for us to maintain this. And what does everyone get out of it? I've listed here a few examples. What do employees get? It can range from onboarding to offboarding. On the HR side of things, you can imagine quite a few options here, but also technical support with scheduling travel or expense reports. All of these sorts of things that employees want to interact with and be able to get support with from time to time. Managers as well, they need access to reports, they need to transact approvals. And then let's think about the candidates coming into our organization. Is there a way for us to engage them early, maybe even before they've applied, and then throughout that journey of applying and interviewing and so on? So really the pitch here is that with the right technology as a foundation, you can bring all of that together into a virtual digital assistant that can answer these questions, can transact for you in a system, meaning that it's just not me giving you an answer based off of an article that I've already written, but I can also go in and apply for leave for you or time off, or I can change your bank account information, or I can order a new laptop because yours is broken. All of those sorts of things should be included in, as well as not just answering the questions, but also transacting for you. And if neither of those work, I should be able to get you to a human who can do those things. So in our particular journey at Pearson, we started really in earnest last year, thinking about how can we start to introduce this? Where's our starting point? We needed a starting point in the journey. We chose recruitment and onboarding as we saw it as a place that we could start to apply a lot of these tools. RPA to begin with, but then also that candidate digital assistant. This year, we are developing the digital assistant, and we're in the middle of that journey right now in order to create that full-fledged experience that I've just shared with you, both on the candidate side, but then on the internal employee side. And we've broken that into minimal viable products so that kind of, if you're familiar with the term of MVP, really enabling us to focus in on what needs to be true for this to be a viable thing that I'm willing to release, and then build on it from there. And that's really what we see as the future. While I'm pitching this as a digital assistant, I'm also telling you that it is the foundation for many more things. What if I need to help new managers understand the best methods of being a manager and being a leader? What if I want to help leaders employees navigate their career, understand what skills they need, access to training and kind of a course plan, as well as helping them with internal mobility? How can I create this holistic experience using artificial intelligence? Well, I had to start somewhere, right? So I can give you a bit of what that journey looks like just looking at this. So with that in mind, how does this look on a technical side? Now, this is built by me, right? But it was meant to be able to speak the language of my IT partners, which is to say, how does all of this connect with each other? So it's meant to be a bit of a architectural stack, but again, in the language of me and my colleagues, in order to communicate what we're trying to do. On the bottom, you'll see how employees should interact, usually on their laptops, maybe on their phone. Candidates as well via SMS, texting, or email. And where are they going? They're going to that central brain. Now, if you've watched the Avengers or you're familiar with Iron Man, you'll know my symbol here in the middle with Jarvis. But Jarvis was that advanced AI dreamed up there by the Avengers people. But this is really the idea that we want to bring to reality, which is something that can interact with us, answer our questions, transact in systems, etc. So that's the bottom layer. How are people interacting with us? What's that middle layer? How does Jarvis know what to answer? Well, we have to feed it the content to build that large language model and enable it to answer Pearson-specific or region-specific, country-specific information. How are we interacting with it? Well, in our case, we have ServiceNow. It's creating tickets. It's logging what's going on. It's also able to move particularly difficult or complex situations directly to a human via chat, right? If it can't transact for itself. And then the top cloud is meant to show that there's a lot of different systems at play. If I'm an employee or manager and I want to come in and transact, in my case, we use Oracle, Human Capital Management. Others may use Workday, you might use SuccessFactors or a variety of different HCMs, right? That's going to be the primary one for me on the HR side. I've got payroll listed here. I've got learning systems, the top layer, some finance and other systems. But nonetheless, those are all going to be connected with that central brain via APIs, right? Those integrations in the cloud that enable information to come and go and for us to transact. So in the end, you've got one place to go. You can get information that's made customized for you and the question you've asked, and you can transact securely with these different systems without ever leaving the chat. I'm not telling you how to go navigate. I'm doing it for you on the back end, and all you're doing is requesting or sending information. So how does this look maybe from a tier structure? For those of you who offer shared services, you might be thinking, okay, so am I taking the human out of the equation? What's going on here? On the left, I really show how the reality works today. I can go and I want you to answer your own question by a search. Well, let's admit those searches oftentimes come up with the wrong results, or you have to dig into the information. Maybe you find it, maybe you don't. Maybe you're impatient and you skip to tier one. You're opening a ticket, you're chatting with us. And maybe you have the right person on the other end. Maybe they have to escalate it, or maybe they're delayed, or maybe it takes days to get an answer. But on up, you can talk to experts and perhaps an escalation. Well, on the right, we streamline that and really start off with that digital assistant. It transacts for you, it answers your questions. And if it's a sensitive issue or a matter that we've pre-identified or it can't answer, then it routes you to an expert. All right, let's get into the business case. So this is an area, again, our main subject here. I've just gone through the pitch, how you describe it. I've given you an example of how I've done it. Real life slides. I didn't change that much for this presentation. Now let's talk a little bit about your strategy to go get the buy-in that you need in order to fund and execute against your AI strategy, assuming you have one, right? But let's start off by talking about value drivers. Really, when we're talking in terms of the return on investment and the values that AI can bring, really getting solid around these different levers, and there's others as well, is going to really help enable you speak the language of maybe finance or IT or senior leaders who have to approve what you're doing. The first on the left is going to be around efficiency and capacity. How is what I'm doing going to improve either our budget, our bottom line, or maybe overall the capacity of the workers who normally interact with us, right? The employees. But nonetheless, I've given there an example in the bottom left, a little bit of that relationship of, as I bring in more efficiency through automation, I may need fewer people to be doing that same work. And therefore, that work that we've historically done with people can be automated. Those people can be redeployed. There's a variety of measures, but that work that we've historically needed to do suddenly becomes more cost effective, and I drive efficiency and capacity. That may not be true for what you're going after, but certainly in the case I've just shared, it is. The experience, hugely important, right? How is your company perceived? Is it perceived as a company that advances, that has high-end technology, or are we just talking about managers who want a quick answer so they can go back to doing what they do best, or employees going off and selling or developing or whatever they need to be doing and driving that better experience? And then, of course, there is a lot of truth to be said that AI can improve the quality, can reduce error. You can really make sure that the value that you're delivering is going to be at a more advanced end than what maybe a human could provide. So those are the three major value drivers. Yours will look a little different, but probably drawing upon those same three pillars than mine did. So let's talk about internal stakeholder dynamics. This is one that we don't want to just brush over. In my experience and the way that we've approached this here, and I have in a couple of companies now, you really need to start thinking about these different groups of stakeholders that are going to have some sort of impact on whether or not you're successful or not. You have your senior sponsors. A lot of us will start there, and that makes a lot of sense. We want to be seen by them. We want to be demonstrating the value that we're bringing, and we absolutely need to have them singing from the same song sheet as us when it comes to the value that we're trying to deliver. That goes then, of course, to the executive decision makers. Sometimes these are in your organization. Maybe there's a central committee. Maybe this sits within IT or elsewhere. But nonetheless, you've got to really create the material that is going to speak to this group of people. Third, here we have technology and data. This is one where we're in a new technology that's fastly evolving, and you are probably not the first in line to ask for support for it. So getting there early, getting there quick, understanding what they're going to be worried about, security, architecture, privacy, right? How are you going to maintain it? Where's this coming? Who's going to pay for this? What resources does technology need to have in order to maintain this? And do they have them today? Fourth is an interesting one. We just stumbled across other organizations that were looking after very similar things as we were. We brought some along with us that we knew had similar values and interests, and then we came across others. In my case, they were customer facing, and we were going after similar sorts of solutions. So we were able to combine forces, share ideas. We meet now monthly. It used to be weekly, to start to share what we're doing and help each other progress, but then also create that combined value. And finally, of course, let's not forget the impacted teams and customers, people who are going to be using what we're developing. And we need to keep them heavily in mind as we're developing our product. So just a couple more slides here. This one is just, like, avoid the gotchas out there with the costs, because I think on the top layer here, we've lined out what our experience has been in terms of what sorts of costs you should be thinking about. The platform itself, you're going to be bringing in software or a platform that is going to cost, right? And it could be the implementation of it's going to cost, but then the platform itself is going to have costs, and it might create costs on other platforms as you build integrations into it. But then also consumption-based costs, right? These technologies that you're buying in are making a profit as well. So you're going to have costs associated with them. Understanding those early is obviously important. But what about those hidden costs that you need to be thinking about? You may need an implementation provider. It could be that your organization can't support it and you're going to need help. You might need new technology resources that your IT team don't have today, or even in your own team, in order to manage and maintain the technology that you're bringing in. In my case, I'm currently looking to hire an automation manager in HR with IT skills, because we know that whatever we dream up is going to need to be maintained and built on, and we need someone within our own organization that can support that. Project management and other things, all of these sorts of things are going to be costs when you're thinking of the ROI that you need to take into account. And finally, my last point today, before we open it up to Q&A, is really about, okay, who are you going to partner with? The field is fresh, right? With so many different options out there. And there are some amazing technologies that are quickly developing. So I'm not going to share with you who we've chosen, but we went through a very rigorous RFP process, and we learned a ton just going through and talking to potential partners, testing ideas with them, understanding what their costs, what their platforms would be like, what they could bring. And that process was probably the most informative of any of these for me. At the bottom, there are fantastic research and advisory firms out there who make it their business to go in and test out these different technologies. And they can bring back great information and help you kind of stack rank in terms of what's important to you and what sorts of technology it can bring. Finally, crowdsourcing, maybe right next to the RFP that we did, talking to the customers of those providers, as well as others out there in the field, was so important to understand the reality. Because if you're not already on the train of AI, chances are you really don't quite grasp all that entails, all of the implications, even the opportunities, but really going out to your network or, like I said, to customers of potential technologies that you're looking at. So with that, I'm excited to answer just a few questions here in our remaining 5 minutes. So I'm going to stop sharing. These slides will be available, as I'm sure you're aware. And let's go over to questions, Nick.
Great. Here's one from the audience. How often do you review user interaction and/or feedback from users to improve the performance of your selected AI tools?
every day. So here's my point here. It's likely that you're going to need dedicated resources that are purely looking into that feedback loop that's coming from the technology, meaning that you need someone who's almost all of them will have some sort of data coming back. But let me just share one example. Let's say an employee comes in and asks a question, and it gives an answer, generated response, Gen AI, super fancy, right? But the employee's like, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I'm talking about. And so they're going to give it a thumbs down. And then you need someone on the back end that's going in and reading that interaction, and probably as a human will be able to understand what the answer should have been or where things went awry. That feedback loop for machine learning, another technical term, is super important as you, especially in the beginning days, start to adjust whatever platform you're using so that it learns from those interactions. And at least initially, most of them will require a human in the loop.
All right, great. Here's another question, Tim. As HR professionals, how can we prepare ourselves to work alongside AI effectively? What new skills will be most important?
I'd kind of classify two different categories here. I think that HR needs to start investing in semi-technical resources within our own organization that can manage this. Most of these will use the words low code or no code, which is great. It means you don't need to know a coding language, but there's still a logic and there's still an understanding of that back-end system that would be best supported by people who understand the domain of HR as well as that technical side. Now, this is probably a small group, but this is a new skill set that we haven't necessarily had in HR for a long time, or anywhere for that matter. The second, and which I think is the larger answer, is what about the rest of HR who are not on that back end or who are not supporting the system overall? This is where, like you being here, as well as doing your own research, is going to be extremely important. Understanding where AI can have an impact, understanding the value that it brings, and getting smart about that. Because as AI begins to add more and more value, humans will find other ways to add value that AI can't. And I think the closer we are to understanding the value AI is bringing and implementing it, the sooner we will adjust and adapt as human beings to where our new areas of value exist.
Great. Yeah, and I think we have time for one more. How do you recommend addressing concerns from managers, and employees who might be hesitant about AI in HR processes?
Yeah, two thoughts here. The first one is I feel like the problem of being worried about how AI is going to mess up or create, I guess, new risks or challenges. I think that one is quickly dissolving. It's still an issue, don't get me wrong, but I think as we're starting to see the industry getting smarter and rapidly evolving, less and less are we worried about AI getting things wrong. Now, there's still data privacy issues. There's still biases that can be unintentionally built in if they're assessing candidates or other things like that, that I think there's a lot of great brains that are working on. But I think to some extent that one should start to diminish over time to an extent. But the one I feel really passionate about, and I think us as HR professionals need to just get it ahead of, is that the teams in HR, the HR professionals, as well as our immediate client base, all really need to understand what's going on and being forthright with that team. In my case, before we even picked a technology vendor, I was in front of my team saying, this will impact your jobs. Does it mean your job goes away? I hope not. But in some cases, that will be true. At a minimum, the work you do will go away. But what does that mean? How can we get ahead of that? How can we work together to make sure your career advances and evolves? And that's where I think that we should take the conversation as it comes to us and make sure that we are preparing both our stakeholders and leaders who are worried about it, as well as the people who feel threatened that that they don't need to be worried and can move forward.
Great. Any final thoughts, Tim?
Um, as you can tell, I'm excited about the space. I think the last point I would make is the sooner you get on the train, the sooner you start delving into it specifically, not generally, the sooner you can create your first business case, and hopefully it's a successful one. The less mystic this will be, and the more you'll know on what you need to do. And I think that that's just a really valuable piece of advice I've seen from several thought leaders, and one that I would pass along to this group.
Great. Well, thanks again, Tim, for such an incredible keynote. And I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. For those of you who earn points throughout today's event, an Argyle team member will be following up with the winners in the next couple of weeks. This officially concludes the Argyle HR Leadership Forum Talent Innovation 2024. Thank you again for joining us today and engaging in our content. We look forward to seeing you at our next Argyle Digital HR event soon, which will be our HR Leadership Forum, Harnessing the Power of HR Technology, on June 18th, 2024. Have a great rest of your day.